Well, here we are in late July. August is almost upon us, and it's time for the August edition of What's in Bloom at the Ruth Bancroft Garden. So each month we put together a selection of plants that are in bloom in that particular month and make that into a handout sheet that we give to our garden visitors. So we're going to go over some of the selections for August What's in Bloom at the Ruth Bancroft Garden. We have lots of aloes at the Ruth Bancroft Garden, and many of them come from South Africa, and many of them bloom in the winter time. So they are a big feature of color in the garden in the winter. But there are aloes that bloom at other times of the year too, including the grass aloes. This is one of those, Aloe Cooperi. Most of the grass aloes are pretty small and grow in grasslands that kind of blend in with the grasses that they grow with. And because the grasslands that are dominant in the eastern part of South Africa are a summer rainfall area, a lot of them don't do well for us here with our winter rainfall climate in California. But this one, Aloe Cooperi, has adapted very well. It's really on the large size for a grass aloe, much taller than the others, with these beautiful candy corn flowers that are orange at the base and green at the tip. And it does always bloom in the summertime. So here it is in bloom now, Aloe Cooperi. Dasylirions are related to the Nolinas and the Bocarnias. They used to be in the family Nolinaceae, but now that's been included into the asparagus family, so they're now a subfamily Nolinoideae within the asparagus family. But in any case, they are prominent plants in the desert southwest of the United States and in Mexico. So this one is Dasylirion wheeleri, which is a relatively common plant in parts of Arizona. And it's got very blue leaves, long, narrow leaves, very toothy at the edges, and these impressive spires of flowers that come out. Now, Dasylirions have separate male and female plants. Until they bloom, you can't tell the one from the other, but when they do bloom, then the flower spire is either thousands of male flowers or thousands of female flowers. The bees are very attracted to the flowers, and they visit the male flowers to get the pollen and the female flowers to get the nectar. And in flying back and forth, they pollinate the plants. Our plant here is a male, and we have one stalk in the back that's already in full bloom with the bees on it, and several others that are about to come into flower, and including some, like this one, that have a wiggle to their stalk. And we don't know why that happens, but sometimes it does happen. And this one here is doing it pretty amazingly. Dasylirions are known as sotol in Spanish and desert spoon in English. Now, you might look at that plant and think, what is spoon-like about that? That flower stalk doesn't look like a spoon, the leaf doesn't look like a spoon, the whole plant doesn't look like a spoon, but that's because the leaf base expands and is cup-like where it clasps the stem, and it's very shiny at that lower part. And so that removed is where the spoon reference comes in. Now, that's very ornamental, that leaf base, because it's so shiny. And in Mexico, frequently those leaf bases are used to make like a mandala that they put around to decorate a church on a festive occasion or a church holiday. And so they're really much used. And you might see those decorating the gate in front of the church and not realize that it came from this plant, the desert spoon. This one is Dasylirion wheeleri. Yucca is a North American genus related to the agaves. So yuccas occur in many different habitats. They occur from the east coast of the United States, the southern part of the east coast, out into the Great Plains and the Great Basin and into the deserts of the southwest and southward throughout most of Mexico. So this is one that grows on the border between the US and Mexico, Yucca schottii. There's been a lot of controversy about whether this is actually a plant of hybrid origin or whether it's a species. But it occurs in such a large area in southern Arizona and the southwest corner of New Mexico and the northwest corner of Durango and the northern part of Sonora in Mexico. It's a well-established plant with a big area of occurrence, and I don't see why we have to think of it as a hybrid. I think of it as a species. But I guess DNA will prove that one way or the other eventually. In any case, these bluish leaves and gets taller and taller with time, and the typical waxy white flowers like you see with most yuccas. But in this case, the flowers don't extend very far above the leaves, so they're more within the leaves than they are above the leaves. This plant can get very tall eventually. They have a specimen at the Arizona garden at Stanford that has grown up really tall and then arched over and come back down again. So they don't stay vertical forever, but they can get to be very old and very large in time. And the creamy white flowers are in summertime. Yucca schottii. In a garden or in a greenhouse, we oftentimes have plants that are related to each other but don't come from anywhere near each other. And we can create hybrids that would never happen in nature. And this is an example. This aloe here, and there's its flowers coming up there, is Aloe dhufarensis ex brevifolia. So Aloe dhufarensis comes from Oman on the Arabian Peninsula, and Aloe brevifolia, the other parent, comes from South Africa. So this is a example of two aloes from the opposite ends, one of the northernmost aloes and one of the southernmost aloes that have combined to make this plant. So Aloe dhufarensis has a very sculptural look to it with toothless leaves that are kind of incurved. Aloe brevifolia is a very small clustering aloe. So this has a little bit of both. It has the teeth from the Aloe brevifolia, but a very sculptural look to it too, like Aloe dhufarensis. The inflorescence has only a few branches on it, and these last for a really long time. So about 3 months. The stalk that came before this lasted for about 3 months, which is really a long time for an aloe stalk to last. So this one's just getting going. You can see the red-orange flowers, tubular flowers, typical of an aloe. And it is visited by hummingbirds like so many aloe flowers are here at the garden. Now, they do not have hummingbirds in Africa or Arabia. They have sunbirds, which are long-beaked, nectar-feeding birds that visit these plants in their own habitats. But the hummingbirds are the ones that do the job here. Aloe dhufarensis ex brevifolia. Cyphostemma is a genus that's related to the grape. And they are found in Africa and in Southern Asia, all the way over to Southeast Asia. But some of the ones with the fattest bases are the ones from Namibia, like this one, Cyphostemma juttae. And you can see the big fat base down here with peely bark on it. In the wintertime, this plant loses all its leaves, and that fat base is really on full display. Now in the summertime, these large toothy leaves are present, and also it has flowered and is producing all these fruits. So although this is related to the grape, these fruits are poisonous, so you don't go and munch those, but they're very decorative. They will take on colorful tinges and become orangey as the summer goes on. But here they are on full display with the very large leaves that are entirely deciduous. So it's hard to believe that this whole flush of huge leaves all just fall off every year, and then next year it makes new ones. Cyphostemma is very popular with growers of bonsai succulents because that big fat base shows really well in a bonsai pot. And they are marvelous, marvelous plants. A little bit on the tropical side. We can only get away with growing it here because this is a bed that gets covered in the wintertime for winter protection. Cyphostemma juttae. Australia has a wonderful genus of plants called Xanthorrhoea. The spelling of that is pretty awful, starting with Xanthorrr. Anyway, you'll see it printed on the screen. And these are known as Australian grass trees. Now, the larger ones do get tall eventually and get a trunk, and so you can see why they call it a grass tree. This one here, if it gets a trunk, it must be in great age, because our plants that are 40 years old still don't have a trunk on them. In any case, they have these long, narrow, needle-like leaves that stir easily in the breeze and create movement in the garden, and these amazing spires of flowers. So the stalk comes shooting up out of the plant, and then the top part looks sort of like a cattail, but in this case, it looks like green astroturf in the upper part, and then from out of that come little white star-like flowers. And this one's just begun. 2 days ago, it had no flowers on it, and now it has the flowers. So the flowers are quite tiny, and there are a lot of them that occur up and down this upper part of the stalk where the astroturf is. Xanthorrhoea quadrangulata from Western Australia. That brings us to the close of our August edition of What's in Bloom at the Ruth Bancroft Garden. Come visit at the garden if you can, and if you can't, well, check out our website. We have lots of photos that we post on Instagram and on our Tumblr page, and we have these videos and lots of plant highlights. I write one every month on some plant or another in the garden, and those go back for years with lots of information, so check it out, the Ruth Bancroft Garden.